Please be seated. Great to be back in South Florida. I hope you guys have your winter mitts ready for this weekend. It's going to be really, really cold, and so we'll be braced. We've had some really good weather, so I guess you come and come and go on that. We're thankful for Tori for hosting us here. Beck, he's doing a really good job at Broward College. I'm excited about what you guys have done. And before we get into the meat of today's really, really awesome announcements, you know, it's like I watch some of this stuff, and it's like, and look, you know, you watch like Indiana play. They've had a great year. They're great. It's good. Like, I'm not like taking anything away from them, right? I mean, they deserve it. It's a great story, great coach, great quarterback. Honestly, I'm a South Florida kid. But it's almost like they're saying just not even play the game. And, you know, I would not count the U out. I think that they're going to play very well. I think we have a great chance. And, you know, before this year, no Florida team had ever won a game in the college football playoff since it started. Now, it hadn't been around that long, but if you think about it, like when I was growing up, it would have been unthinkable if they had a playoff. We'd have Florida teams winning almost every other year, right? And so so Miami's really put Florida back on the map as a college football state again. So we're looking forward to that. I know we've got, you know, another week to go for the anticipation, but it's going to be a good one and potentially really big for South Florida and for the state of Florida. Well, we're joined here today, in addition to, of course, Tori. We've got other Broward College Board of Trustees. We also have our Florida Insurance Commissioner, Michael Jaworski. And if we had bad announcement, we wouldn't hold a press conference to announce that. So they're good announcements on that, and we need that. And then our fearless Chief Financial Officer, Blaise Ingoglia, who's done a really good job, and I'm very proud of what he's been able to do. So if you look at all the different things that we've seen and tried to deal with over the years, we've had just lived through the period. Our country's had the biggest inflation it's had in 40 years. And that affected everything from groceries. It affected everything from the price of housing. And then, of course, in price of insurance. And nationwide, over the last 4 or 5 years, the price of home insurance has gone up 40%. It's not just Florida. People act like because they're focused on Florida, but that's been an issue. The #1 inflationary item last year across the U.S., actually not in Florida, but was auto insurance. And so you're seeing this. So this has been a huge, huge issue. It's not amenable to simple solutions. You know, people say, oh, I'm just going to do this. It's not that simple. There's a lot of different factors at play in these markets. These are private companies that do not have to do business in this state if they don't think that they want. And we've seen in the past where many companies were driven out of the state of Florida, and sometimes to the cheering of politicians at the time. And then what happens later is people are wondering, you know, what's going on with these markets. And so we had a period of inflation. That was driven by the federal government. That wasn't by the state of Florida. We're paying down record debt. We're not adding debt in Florida. We're doing, I think, what you'd want to be for fiscal prudence. But you had that doing. Then we also had a situation, particularly with homeowners. We had 6 major hurricanes in 7 years. Now, none in Broward, but we had Irma that hit a lot of parts of the state, Michael, which hit a Category 5 in the Panhandle. We had Hurricane Ian, which was a Cat 5 in southwest Florida. We had Idalia in 2023, and then last year, 2 years ago, I guess now, 2024, we had 2 back-to-back major hurricanes. And so that's just something you got to deal with. There's more risk in Florida because we're a peninsula located where we are, and there's a lot of positives for that. There's a little bit of risk for that too. So that's just the reality that we have to contend with. And then you also just had home values going up so much, and so whatever, if you had a home that was $300,000, insure that. Well, now cost of making repairs is a lot higher than that. So that was driving it. But the one thing that was really government in need of reform in Florida, at least, to stabilize and reform this market and stop having, you know, these really escalating premiums, was the fact that in Florida we had 8% of all legal claims nationwide for homeowners, or no, we had 8% of homeowners claims nationwide, but that accounted for almost 80% of litigation expenses nationwide right here in Florida. And the interesting thing was, before they did the market reforms we did with the legislature a few years ago, the majority of that in Florida in like 2022 were 3 counties. Do you want to guess which ones? Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach. Now, here's the thing. None of those counties had been hit by hurricane. I mean, maybe a little Dade on Irma, but none of them had been hit. And yet they're driving all this homeowners insurance litigation. That obviously is not something that's on the up and up. There's an incentive to bring cases. There's an incentive for people to make money off this. Well, what's going to happen is people aren't going to want to do business there, or they're going to raise premiums. And so we work with the legislature to do reforms. On that, I'll talk about that in a minute, but we knew that takes time because the market's got to adjust. You have reinsurance, you have all these other things. But we also knew, and then auto insurance too. Again, we can't, I can't control Florida driving. It's tough. You've got a lot of different folks out there, and it's just different. But we were seeing the legal environment drive costs and drive claims as well. So there was a larger legal reform effort, and apart from homeowners, that was done, that was good. But in the meantime, because you knew some time to take effect, we launched programs to help consumers. And so, we did My Safe Florida Home. We started that up again. It had been done. And so we did a lot of resources for grants for people to harden their homes. And then by hardening, they're entitled to reduction, in their insurance rates. And so we did that in 22, I think 21, 22, 23. We did do it for 24. But there was a lot of people on the wait list, and my view was we needed to try to clear the wait list. So you remember a year ago, I called the special session, immigration enforcement, condo reform, but then also with the hurricane wait list, because I thought a lot of people had gotten whacked. We wanted to clear the wait list. Legislature really hasn't done that. They've done some money, so we're going to do some for the grants. But my view is like, if you've already approved somebody to be on a wait list and they're going to make these repairs, then fund the program. But the reality is that was a concerted effort to try to mitigate some of what was going on as these reforms took effect, and we did dedicate a lot of resources to be able to do that. Now, we've also done market reforms and transparency, and Mike Jaworski will talk about, since we've done some of these reforms in the last couple years, they have actually fined bad actors more than had ever been fined in modern history. But the difference is if the insurance office is doing it and they get the money, they send it back to the customer. When you do it with litigation, it goes into the pocket of the trial attorneys. Well, what would you rather have, the trial attorneys or going back to consumers? So they've been able to do that and really bring a lot of accountability, which I think is something that's very, very significant. So, where do we stand now? And a lot of people remember, after Ian, they said, oh, market's going to collapse. After having 2 storms in 2024, oh no, there's just no way. I kind of get a kick out of some of this stuff because I remember Hurricane Milton, and it came, and I think it came started in the afternoon and went through maybe the night. And so I'm on a show the next morning, and they're like, Governor DeSantis, we have estimated, someone has estimated $50.6 billion in damage. And I'm just thinking to myself, how the hell can you estimate that so quickly? We literally just woke, it was still going on at night. You go in the next morning and you see, how can you do it? And in reality, that was a big overestimation. And I think Mike will talk about some of the stuff that we've been able to do, that he's been able to do for this announcement of some of these reductions. Because some of these models are totally flawed and they overestimate. And so if they're estimating a certain amount of damage, guess what? They're going to charge you more premium. But the damage wasn't necessarily there. So we've had all this. So a lot of people thought, oh, market's going to implode. But here's where we are right now. So since we've done these reforms a couple years ago, you remember California, all the companies are leaving. In Florida, 17 new companies have entered the market for home insurance. What that has done, as of January of 2026, there have been 83 filings for rate decreases. and 100 filings for no increase, including one of the largest insurers in Florida Peninsula, an 8% decrease that they filed for. Now, people will say when these filings come in, people say, well, I didn't see that. Well, yeah, because it's the renewal when it takes effect. And so that will happen. So as of January, the 30-day average requests by companies for home rates are down 2.3%, which is, again, nationwide, this is still all going up. I mean, we're one of probably the only states in the country where you're seeing decreases. This is going up everywhere. S&P Global in 24, we had the lowest increase in the nation of all 50 states for homeowners. I think probably 25 it'll be similar once they produce those numbers. And think about this: 33 states during that year had double-digit increases, including as high as 23% in Nebraska that had happened. And so Florida had been stabilized by then. 5 other states had more than 20%: Montana, Iowa, Minnesota, Utah, and Washington. And so that's something that clearly those reforms started to take effect. Now, reinsurance. These companies will insure, and then they have to buy insurance for themselves, basically. That's a global market. It's not just something that's, although Florida is a big part of that. And so reinsurance, when those skyrocket, it's going to lead to other things skyrocket. When they go down, it puts a downward pressure. So the January 1st renewals that we have seen have been decreases for the reinsurance market, and that's a sign of confidence that Florida has brought stability to its overall environment here, and they would not be risking capital if they didn't see that. So here we are with the reductions. I mentioned Florida Peninsula, 8.2% average rate decrease. Security First, another 62,000 homes, 8% average rate decrease. Universal Property and Casualty, 512 homes, average rate decrease of 5.1%, and that's a subset, and so there's others. So that's kind of the overall private market, what we've seen kind of leading into this year. But I think, and Mike can talk more about it, I think they anticipate to see that continue in that direction, given the success that we've seen. Auto insurance, big problem across the country, and obviously in Florida, I think our rates have always been higher than many other states. Again, part of it's the demographics and the driving, and it is what it is. I mean, you know, you mix like daredevils with retirement communities, and it's tough. I mean, it's really tough. If I had an easy solution for that, you know, I would do it. But here, where we are with auto, the top 5 companies here have averaged a 6.5% reduction in premium. We also now have the lowest, what they call, recorded loss ratio for Florida in the last 15 years. That just means that it pulls the rates down when that happens. In the last 12 months, 42 auto companies have filed for a rate decrease, and 32 of those companies have filed that within the last 6 months. So here we are with auto. USAA, 268,000 drivers, average decrease 6.1%. Florida Farm Bureau, 86,000 drivers, average decrease 8.7%. Progressive, we announced earlier that Progressive was refunding $1 billion. Is that going out soon, or when? It should be completely out January 15th. It'll be completely out January 15th for people because they had charged more than they needed to based on the losses. And so they are sending back $1 billion to their customers. But in addition to that, for their almost 1 million drivers that they insure in Florida, average rate decrease 8%. State Farm, 86,000 drivers, decrease average 10.1%, and that's their 3rd reduction in 2 years. So that's a total of 20%, which would net to consumers $1 billion in savings on those. AAA, 3 rate reductions over the last year, totaling 15%, and then Allstate, 13,000 drivers, average decrease of 4%. And you talk to every single one of these companies, the only reason this is happening is because of the market reforms, because there's insanity brought to this, and so they're now able, and honestly, they're kind of forced to do this, right? Because it's a competitive market, and if one's not, the other people can shift. And I've talked to people that said, yeah, I heard you said the auto and mine didn't go down. And I was like, well, did you look for other ones? And like, no. I'm like, all right, well, do it and tell me that, oh, I did. Oh, yeah, you know what? I saved $200 or whatever. So that's how the consumer benefits by making sure you're doing that. So one kind of preliminary announcement before we get to the main event. This is not just about what you get on your insurance a premium as a car owner. It also impacts other aspects of the economy. So today we can say that because of our reforms, Uber, the transport where you go, you can take an Uber, and if you don't have your own car, you don't want to do that. They have seen lower costs in Florida than in the rest of the country over the years, and their fares are now 6 points lower than in 49 other states. Since March of 2025, Uber riders in Florida have saved tens of millions of dollars because of these reforms. Drivers are completing more trips and also bringing more money home to their families. And so Uber, I think, is going to send out a message today to their customers, and here's a quote from it. Florida's reforms are working. Riders are seeing lower trip fares and drivers are completing more trips. Let's protect these wins. Sign up here to stay informed on legislation that could threaten your savings. Now, obviously, there was an effort to reverse some of these reforms last year. It didn't go anywhere. I'm not sure there's any life left in that push. Who knows? But clearly, I think if you're doing that, you're certainly going against the overwhelming, incontrovertible body of evidence. Now, for the biggest news of the day. So I think most people, particularly in southern Florida, know, there's some of these policies, some of these companies, Peninsula, whatever, they may not even offer policies in parts of southern Florida. Now, part of it is because of the history of the litigation abuse, I think, but part of it is also, for other reasons. And so there's a lot of people in Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach, and Monroe who are on Citizens Insurance, which is the insurer of last resort. And if you remember, when you had the hurricanes in 04 and 05, you had the market really deteriorate. A lot of people went on to Citizens. The problem with that is that, if you have all these people on it, Citizens may not be solvent to be able to handle that. You saw a decrease in Citizens when we had that 10 years with no hurricanes, but as the hurricanes kicked up, some of those companies that came into Florida 10, 15 years ago, they kind of dropped by the wayside. They were not capitalized well enough, and so you started to have more people on. So we got up to the state 1.3 million Citizens policies, which, those rates are not necessarily actuarially sound all the time. The idea that if there was a catastrophic storm, could Citizens do all that? And probably not, right? I mean, that was kind of our concern with it all along. And the problem is Citizens has a lot of power to assess Floridians writ large, and so you actually could be assessed on your own private policy having nothing to do with Citizens by Citizens if they need to do it. So there's a lot of reasons why we didn't want to see that happen to people throughout Florida. But what's happened now, as the market has gotten better, as more companies have come in, Citizens went from 1.3 million, now it's under 400,000 throughout the state of Florida. And, some people said, well, we shouldn't have a Citizens. Well, look, in a perfect world, but I don't know that all of those homes would get private offers to do, especially in like Monroe County, right? I mean, it's a tougher situation. So Citizens, we believe now, given that they were collecting all this premiums for so many years at much higher levels, now that they have less exposure, we're like, okay, well, what are you going to do to be able to bring that back? And Mike Yaworski at the insurance office, he's got way more authority over Citizens, given its relationship to the state of Florida, than he would over just a private company. And so Citizens had submitted, I guess last December, last month, they submitted a proposal, kind of their request for going forward. And honestly, it was milquetoast. It was maybe some very modest reductions, but really didn't fully capitalize on the momentum in order to deliver wins for the policyholders. And that's really what it's all about. That's why we're doing all this stuff. And so what Mike and his agency did is, they have not approved that request the way it was done, and instead they basically tweaked it to be able to produce historic rate decreases for Citizens Insurance customers in the state of Florida. And so we have under 400,000 policies. That is 50% less than like a year ago. Huge decline, lowest number of policies in 14 years. And if you look at other states that have these things, they're going in the opposite direction. So it's good. So we're in a great position to be able to really put the thumb on the scale to make a difference for people. And so that's what Mike has done with his office. And so today we are happy to announce historic reductions, particularly for South Florida policyholders, including Monroe County. So the vast majority of Citizens policyholders will receive a significant reduction. The statewide average will be 8.7% reduction. Of those, over 150,000 will see their rights drop by more than 10%. Here in South Florida, Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach, average reduction will be 13.4%, as this area was the center of the litigation abuses. Right here in Broward, 27,000 homeowners, average reduction 14.1%. Miami-Dade, 42,000 homeowners seeing an average reduction of 14%. Palm Beach, 26,000 homeowners, average reduction 11.9%. Monroe County, so you have Monroe, you have kind of normal, and then some have wind only. So of the homes, the 1,000 homes that have full coverage, even in Monroe County, 11.3% reduction for those homes. And if you have wind only, you may see a reduction, but you will not see an increase. There will be no coverage, and that'll be for the renewals coming in this spring. If you look at like the Tampa Bay area, where you obviously had issues with both Helene and with Milton, you'll see reductions between 5 and 7% on average. And, we'll see kind of how this works as they rebuild some of these areas. I mean, I know they've done a lot of rebuilding, but as they're more fortified, they may even qualify a lower rate. So you've never really seen, I don't think, rate reductions, certainly with Citizens at this level, any time in modern memory that anyone can talk about. This was not necessarily what Citizens had initially proposed. I think Mike really went in with his team and said, okay, they've lost almost 1 million policies. They were getting all those premiums for all those policies. Now their exposure's less. You're seeing in these 3 counties much less litigation abuse than you had seen previously. We got to think a little bit bigger here. And so these really big reductions of 14.1, 14%, and 11.9 in Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach, I mean, those are going to be really, really meaningful for an awful lot of people. So, and then the other kind of smaller issue, not smaller, it's a big issue, but it probably affects smaller, is we have also something called surplus lines. Now, that is not done by the insurance office. It's kind of just, if you want it. And so the regulatory framework is a little bit different. But for business policies, surplus lines are now down 33% in Florida, and residential surplus lines are down 15%. And that's new numbers that are coming in that I think is indicative of, these reforms being effective. So I want to thank Mike for what he did and his team. Because, it's like, look, Citizens is something that it's just a different relationship than we would have with like a private business somewhere, right? It's the state's insurer of last resort. I think we have the right to insist that Citizens is doing all it can to bring relief to its customers. They weren't in a position to do that, admittedly, a couple years ago. I mean, we were in a much more difficult environment. But since these reforms have really stabilized things, man, pass on the savings to these folks. And so this will be a really, really big deal. And I'm happy to be able to be here to announce it. And Mike, you want to add some color? Come on up.
Thank you, Governor. It's fantastic to be here today to make these series of announcements about our property insurance market and our auto market. As the Governor said, the past few years in Florida have been difficult. We went through a period where we saw a sudden rise in the number of natural catastrophes, coinciding with the sudden increase in the amount of litigation that Florida was experiencing in that space. And all of that triggered some uncertainty within the reinsurance market, leaving a very, very difficult environment for consumers. But let's not make any mistakes about it. The announcements the Governor made today are entirely related to the tort reform measures that were enacted in 2022 and 2023 under his leadership, under leadership of CFO Ingoglia when he was in the Senate, and other people who said that we have to do better in Florida for our consumers. We have to have insurance be maintained in a way that is affordable to consumers. And this is really more and more as we've gone through this process 2 years, 3 years after the enactment of those changes, this is more evidence that it was the right thing to do. Florida is not in an environment that I can tell you with certainty that this is the most challenging insurance market in the world. It's the 7th largest in the world and the most challenging. We have, as the Governor said, we are a peninsula that is sandwiched between these two beautiful, beautiful bodies of water that just happen to love to throw storms our way sometimes. And as a result of that, we have to be on top of our game with insurance. And what the tort reform was all about was saying we can't afford to have that kind of third-party excess taking money out of the system on the backs of everyday policyholders. And that's what was happening. When folks talk about suing their insurer, sometimes it is necessary, and this law did not prevent people from doing that going forward. But when you talk about suing your insurer, the money that is spent on those claims and that litigation comes out of the pocket of all policyholders. And so it was an expense that Florida could not afford. When we look at what's happened since these reforms, we're seeing nothing but good news across almost all data points. The Governor mentioned the news across of Florida versus the rest of the country. It is absolutely true and almost astounding when you compare to where we were just a few years ago when we saw 13 companies that could no longer bear the burden of providing insurance go insolvent. Reversing that completely in just a matter of years with 17 new carriers. And on top of that, one thing that is not discussed enough is the fact that the carriers that are here, they were in a hubble, in almost a tortoise shell. They kind of recoiled back, withdrew from various areas of the state, and stopped writing. Now they're writing again, and they're expanding rapidly. They're doing everything they can to get that business. That business is something they want. Our major national carriers, something that's vital to the future long-term success of Florida, they're writing again in Florida. There was news a couple of years ago about one insurer, one major national carrier, Progressive, that was going to start drawing back its book of business. We see the opposite now. They're looking for they're back in the state of Florida. They're writing again. They've got a new program. They're doing things. So Florida is becoming more and more of an attractive place for people to deploy capital. And one thing that we haven't forgotten about during this entire process is market accountability. One thing I wanted to make sure of, and the Governor, the CFO, really the whole cabinet, the Senate President, all of them have been very supportive of, is making sure that we have market accountability along the way. Florida is not the wild, wild west when it comes to insurance and insurance regulation and making sure that companies are doing what they promise to do when consumers pay them money. We have stepped up our enforcement activities dramatically over the past couple of years. Legislature's given us new resources. We've worked closely with CFO Ingoglia's office to ensure that those consumer complaint calls that he's getting are things that we're looking at and taking action on when necessary. And it's a process that's taken time to build up that team, but I just got numbers from our folks up in Tallahassee that told me that at the end of 2025, we closed out that year by returning $40 million to policyholders in instances where we saw issues where they were due more than they were given by their insurer. That's oftentimes with interest associated with it, and that number will continue to grow. It won't grow because insurers are getting worse. It'll grow because we're taking the resources the legislature has given us over the past few years, the governor has supported giving us over the past couple of years, and making sure that we're taking action and doing things to protect consumers. So as those systems build out, we'll see that number grow, and hopefully, as a result of that, we'll see the opposite take place. We'll see insurers that are doing the right thing more and more because they know that the folks in Tallahassee have the everyday policyholders back. And so we're taking all these actions to build a comprehensive system that, under the governor's leadership, that really, over the past couple of years, has changed dramatically in Florida. The mantra within the office is that we've been through, in Florida, since Hurricane Andrew, 3 major hurricane crises. Let's make this one the last one. Let's build a sustainable system over time that matters. I'm hopeful that this legislative session will not be taken up with discussion about repealing the tort reforms and moving back to a place where somehow policyholders are having to subsidize this lucrative bad actor in the trial bar space, and we move towards a direction where we work on things that improve the everyday condition for Floridians. But we're really moving in a great place. This market, the governor mentioned us versus other states. We're seeing that is true, and we're seeing it's again astounding numbers to see that we're no longer, but according to many sources that aggregate this information, we're no longer the most expensive place to insure in the country. That has fallen to other states in the Midwest and in California and elsewhere. Which, think about that when we talk about that body of water. We talk about that fact that we have 27% of the global hurricane catastrophe risk within our borders. We're no longer the most expensive place to insure, and that's because we've cut that waste that existed throughout this. Talking about Citizens more directly, Citizens was at a point during the peak of the litigation crisis where they were being sued in the Tri-County area over 800 times a month. Many claims would come. The first time that Citizens would hear about was in the form of a lawsuit, would be the first notice of loss coming to a consumer, coming to the company. I cannot tell you how expensive that process is. If any of you happen to have been involved in litigation or see that, it's not a cheap process. It is very expensive. And ultimately, in the old system, Citizens and the policyholder of Citizens were having to pay for the entire cost of that transaction, beyond just the settlement, but the actual legal fees associated with it. And you would often see that this litigation, a lawsuit, would stretch on for years and years and years of billing. And we had a law on the books in Florida that said that that ultimately said that 9 times out of 10 that the insurer, meaning the policyholders of that insurance company, had to pay for all legal costs associated with those lawsuits, unique to Florida. And it was, unfortunately, sounded like a great thing to do to help policyholders, but it hurt all of us and the costs that we all bore collectively around that. The Citizens rate filing itself. Last year, we announced that there was a decrease in Miami-Dade County of 9.9%, and that was actuarially sound. This year, the rates that we're announcing are also actuarially sound. We doggedly pursued within the office and looked through every single avenue to ensure that everything we could find within that rate filing that was able to be reduced on an actuarially sound basis was in fact reduced on an actuarially sound basis. We took what Citizens gave us and we hunted through every single piece we could to ensure the consumers actually got the benefit at the end of the day. This is a measure designed to ensure that while that depopulation is taking place, while that good news there is happening, the consumers that still have nowhere else to go are getting a fair rate that is representative of what they have. One thing that's unique about Citizens compared to every other residual market in the country but Louisiana is that our residual market is still a comprehensive coverage option. In most states, when you have a residual market, you have a bare bones policy that's given to you as the last resort as your last resort insurance. In Florida, you get that comprehensive coverage, and it's because we recognize the uniqueness of our situation in Florida. We recognize that insurance can sometimes be tumultuous, the consumers need options, and Citizens is there to make sure that that happens. So as we've gone through this rate filing, as we've looked through every single avenue to see what is going on, we've had our actuaries look at it for weeks now to make sure that no stone was left unturned around the ultimate filing. We found that actuarially sound rates with those reductions that are necessary, but also feel confident as we go forward that these rates are in fact actuarially sound. This is the correct number to have, and Citizens will remain well capitalized and able to take on future risks that are associated with it for those policyholders. Citizens showed a remarkable amount of resiliency in its economic condition. When this crisis started, it had $8.7 billion in surplus. It was more capitalized and on a per policyholder basis than just about every single insurance company in the country. That process will continue even with these reductions to make sure that we're not doing anything that would lead to future burdens or assessments for our everyday policyholders. It's just at the end of the day the result of the reforms. We see tremendous work, and that's why if you look at it, the governor mentioned that the litigation environment was the most propensity was in the Tri-County area, and that's why when you look at this filing, you see the deepest cuts now are in that Tri-County area because that cost has been removed from the overall platform. As we go forward, the My Safe Florida Home Program and other things are true benefits to the people of Florida. And I'm hopeful that we do get that ultimate funding that the governor has called for, and other things, because they're so important to everyday Floridians to help harden the home. One of the things we talk about on a nationwide basis is that Florida, you know, if we had not taken those hard steps 20 years ago to harden our building code, I cannot imagine how much more difficult it would be to insure Florida today. But we did that. We bore that cost, and it's paying off big dividends in the form of rate reductions and mandatory mitigation credits and insurance, and making sure that people feel good about the homes they're living in, the homes they're buying. The My Safe Florida Home Program is another example of where we're doing that, and it's paying dividends for the people of Florida. On reinsurance, the governor mentioned reinsurance and what's taking place in that space. If you've not heard that term, it's understandable. It's essentially what insurers buy to insure themselves against unexpected catastrophic loss. And it is a big portion of every policyholder's premium, upwards of 30%. That rate is continuing to go down and stabilize. At the peak of the crisis, we saw massive increases in the cost of reinsurance take place year over year, and that was passed on the consumer. The year following tort reform, we saw a reduction of about 8%. Last year, we saw a reduction. This year, we don't know yet, but the January renewals look very good, and we think we'll see larger renewals in mid-June around that time that will reduce that cost even further, which will lead to further savings. I think I would leave with this. All the good news that you're hearing today is expected to continue, barring either some sort of dramatic legislative action that spooks the market in some way, or outside of a major cataclysmic, nationwide or beyond systemic economic issue. We will continue to see this good news emerge because of the work we've done here. I was talking to the CFO earlier, and he asked about what was going on in the workers' comp space and why we've had so many years now of reductions. And if you look at that time period, it's because people during that time period, elected officials, saw that we had a crisis in that space. We actually had out-of-control litigation. And we're still, decades into this now, receiving the benefits of engaging in that tort reform and making sure that we had a clean system that didn't have third parties abusing it. So the citizens rate is just another great sign of the good news that we have to share about our property market. I'm glad we had the opportunity to get in there really deep and look at all the savings that we could find and make sure that it was a fully honest and actuarially sound rate filing. And so I look forward to signing that as soon as possible and getting that good news out to consumers at renewal. Thank you.
Okay.
First of all, it's great to be here in South Florida, and I will tell you on behalf of Gator Nation and a diehard Gator, good luck to the University of Miami. I'm hoping you guys can shock the world. They have an amazing team, and they are doing amazing things. So good luck to the University of Miami next Monday. To put this all in context and to understand the importance of the reforms and the importance of today's announcement and put it all into context, because this is big news. I want everyone to understand where we were and then fast forward and compare it to where we are right now so everyone can truly understand it. You know, 4 years ago, we were in a much different place here in the state of Florida. Just some statistics. The governor had alluded to some of this earlier. So the state of Florida has about 8% of the population of the United States. We had 8% of the insurance claims in the United States. Sort of makes sense, commensurate with the population. But we had 76% of all the lawsuits in the United States filed in the state of Florida. So that shows you that there was a problem, and that problem needed to be fixed. Now, with increased costs of a replacement cost, the thing, and the governor alluded to this, the thing that we can control is the rates. So we understood that there were people out there taking advantage of the current system. They were abusing the current system, and all the policyholders would wind up paying the freight for all of that. And that was causing such a huge spike in rates for insurance, both auto insurance and property. And you really have to go back and remember what the environment was 3-4 years ago. You had companies going bankrupt in the state of Florida, not necessarily because of big storms, but just regular storms, because there was so much litigation, so much lawsuits going on that these companies were being put at risk. Now, let me just say this, is that some companies, and the commissioner and I and the governor know that there are some companies out there that don't necessarily do everything that they're supposed to be doing on behalf of the policyholders. That's why you see fines coming out of the insurance companies. That's why we do everything that we can to make sure that we pass good laws like the Insurer Accountability Act, so we have the power to go in and make sure that we're doing right on behalf of the policyholders. But these companies were going bankrupt just because of little storms, sometimes big storms, but little storms. We had double-digit rate filings going on ad nauseum every year, double-digit rate increases, double-digit rate increases. We saw capital fleeing the state. People did not want to invest in the market in the state of Florida because they were worried that their money was being put at risk because of the litigious environment that we were put in. And quite frankly, the insurance market was near collapse here in the state of Florida. So we understood that we actually had to do something, and the historic tort reform, lawsuit reforms that we did in the 2022, 2023 years really settled the market and then put us on the environment and path that we are today. So where are we today? We have 17 new companies writing insurance in the state of Florida, forming. They're deploying capital into the state of Florida. They are starting to understand that all insurance is a risk, and we took away a lot of the risk with the overly litigious environment that we had, and markets started to come back. 17 new insurance companies started. We had dozens of companies now filing double-digit rate decreases. We had auto insurers that we alluded to before now returning money to the policyholders, over $1 billion so far, coming on January 15th with Progressive, knowing that their money belongs in the pocket of the policyholders, not in the company, because they charge too much up front. That only happens with the lawsuit reform. And now, today, announcing that all 67 counties in the state of Florida are going to see rate reductions, with half of them almost half of the policies double-digit rate reductions for citizens' policies. That is a big deal. And surplus lines. Just so everyone understands, we use these terms all the time and not everyone understands it. Surplus lines is basically, if it doesn't go into the admitted market, it goes into another type of market. That's a surplus lines market. 33% negative rate decreases for business policies, 15% for homeowners. So if you think about it, you have Uber. Uber just announced that their rates are going down. If you think about it, rates going down for rideshare, rates going down for auto, rates going down for commercial policies, rates going down for workers' comp, rates going down for homeowners policies. That all traces back to one thing, is getting the waste, fraud, and abuse out of the system, the reforms put in place. Those are the reasons why you are seeing this. Look, Florida doesn't wait. We see if there's a problem out there, and we act, and we acted with this lawsuit reform. I will tell you this, that housing affordability is a big issue. Not just here in the state of Florida, but nationwide. In fact, you see socialists running for mayor in New York, running on a platform out of affordable housing. Now, obviously, his idea of fixing it is way different than our way of fixing it. But it is issue, and I will tell you that there is no other state in the United States that is tackling this issue head on. The governor knew years ago that the insurance market had to be fixed, or we were going to maintain a crisis level when it comes to insurance for years to come. We fixed it. That's part of affordable housing. making sure that you're not paying through the nose for things that you shouldn't be paying for. And now we're hopefully going to see historic property tax reform. No other state, no other governor is doing more than this governor to deliver on the promise of affordable housing. Look, this is just another in a long line of other issues that other states can't tackle. Florida is continuing to lead again on the issue of housing affordability. And look, this isn't luck. This is leadership. This doesn't happen by happenstance. This happens because of hard work and caring about the consumers, the taxpayers, and the policyholders. I will tell you that since I've been blessed to be in this role, I've been working day and night and day to make sure that we are making this place more affordable and more accountable, making sure that government is smaller and more accountable to the people. Yes, historic tort reform. Now, the naysayers are going to say that, yeah, but what? Policyholders are in a better place. They're paying less money today than they were before. And I will tell you that I personally, I am not here to protect the profits of insurance companies. I'm not here to protect the profits of trial attorneys. I'm here to protect the policyholders and the taxpayers. And with this historic tort reform and the good news on insurance and the good news about to come when it comes to property taxes, Florida is leading again. God bless you guys, and God bless the great state of Florida.
Well, I appreciate those comments. And, you know, we've worked really hard across a wide range of issues to bring relief to people, particularly as we saw kind of the inflation rear its ugly head, largely due to COVID spending, Biden stimulus, all these other things that were happening, Federal Reserve printing money, all this. And you know, you go back and look, we did, it was my initiative, you know, we did for a few years, we did a 50% toll rebate program for people that are commuters. They would get the money back. I thought that was very successful, gave people some relief. They're saving, you know, 20, 30 bucks a month a lot of times doing that. We also did, because, you know, we have state sales tax, no income tax, but state sales tax. But, you know, there's a lot of things that are exempt, groceries, medications. And so we made permanent exemption for all baby items like diapers, wipes, strollers, cribs, all that. I think we did that a couple years ago just as my youngest was getting out of diapers. My wife asked me why I didn't do that 4 years earlier. Well, we didn't have inflation like we did for it, but so now you're able to go with no tax on all of those items. And then, as Blaise mentioned, you know, you have home values have gone up. A lot of that, honestly, is not like because the currency inflated. It's because there's a lot of demand to be in Florida, particularly over those COVID years. People were sight unseen just buying homes to get the hell out of wherever they were because they had had enough and they wanted to come to a refuge of sanity. So there you saw that. You know, those markets go up and down. Things happen. It's not something government could control. But the reality is, and this is true nationwide, but Florida, I think, really had strong demand. You know, you go back 5 years ago, the median home value was less than it is today, you know, by pretty significant, right? Then you add in interest rates and where it would cost to do a mortgage today versus what that would have been 5 years ago. Even if the home was the same price, your monthly payment would have been a lot less there just on interest rates alone. But then you also have insurance. And so we're talking about great movement there to be able to bring relief, particularly with Citizens and these other companies are having to lower rates. That's going to be a big relief to people. We obviously want to keep that momentum going. But then the other thing that makes it tough are the property taxes. And especially if you have to buy a new home, or I mean, it could be an existing home, but like if you have to make a new purchase, then you're locked in at a very significant tax basis. And, you know, I've had, and it has huge impacts on everything. I mean, obviously being able to afford the tax is tough. And there may be some people that decide that's not what they want to do because they don't want to have to pay it. It also kind of freezes the real estate market in the sense of, you know, I've talked to people who are older who would like to downsize, They literally have like really nice home, but if they downsize to like a townhouse or they pay more taxes because they'd been in their home for a long time, their tax basis is lower, then you go and the tax base all of a sudden. So it's had a really distortive impact on all this. And so now the property tax is not state. We run surpluses at the state. We've paid down, just since I've been governor, if you look at 180 years of Florida's taxpayer-supported debt, just since I've been governor, we've retired over half of that, 50% wiped off the books, and a lot of that has been accelerated repayment. We did an accelerated program, so when you do accelerated, our guys will go in, they'll buy the bonds at a discount, retire them, which obviously, saves money, but then they save on all the interest costs going forward. So we've saved over $1 billion, probably about $2 billion in foregone costs as a result of accelerating that, which has been really, really good. So we've done that. And we have no income tax. If you are really strapped and all you're doing the necessities of life, you really won't pay sales tax because groceries, baby items, medications, that almost all of that stuff is exempt. So you'd pay very little. Now, if you buy a yacht in Fort Lauderdale, you're going to end up having to pay sales tax on that. But that's just the way it goes. So we've done that, and I think that's something that's that's really, really meaningful. So you have all this, but on property, it's just something that has really been difficult, and it's almost like you could buy a home and then all of a sudden they tell you it's worth more, so you got to pay more. You never sold it for more. Normally it's like, I have something, how much it's worth, it depends on how much somebody actually is willing to pay for it, right? Well, with property tax, oh, no, this neighbor's house, your house, you bought it for $400,000, oh, no, it's worth $700,000. Yeah, you got to pay more tax on it. Well, how is that fair for folks? And what's happened in Florida, because you've seen a rise in values, even when counties, and I know some counties have raised millage and some cities have raised millage, but even if you don't raise the millage, if the valuations are going up, then you're taking in more revenue from people. So 2019, with the first year I was governor, if you go back, now we're not, again, state doesn't get any of that. We have the sales tax and a couple other things. We got rid of the business rent tax. We've done permanent back to school holiday, permanent disaster response. We've done, what tax could I cut that will make a difference? Honestly, the property is the 99% of people that have an issue with taxes in Florida talk about property tax. I never hear anyone tell me about some of these others. We did have some on business rent, but that's more of the business owners, which is fine. It was a bad tax. We got rid of it. So it's like, what can you do? We don't do it, but it's local government. So 2019, all property tax revenue to local governments, $32 billion, which is, a pretty good amount of money. Last year, $56 billion to local governments. So from 32 to 56 billion in a 6-year period, 6 or 7 year period. First of all, that is not sustainable, right? You can't keep increasing that much. Now, I know we've had population growth, and Blaise will point this out when he does his FAFO reviews. Population growth, inflation, sure. So was it going to go more than 32? Of course it would be with that. But really, you got to go all that much? And so, we're working with folks in the legislature, to craft something that's going to be positive to be able to put on the ballot. And I think the key is we want to focus on Florida residents and their primary homesteaded property. I don't really care to give, property tax relief to people that own 10 Airbnbs. It's like, I'd rather them pay the tax than you pay the tax as somebody that is trying to raise a family or you're retired or something like that. So focus on those homesteaded Floridians. But, it's interesting. Of that $56 billion, it's like a third is homesteaded Floridians. The rest is non-homestead residential and commercial properties. And so we have a lot of room here to be able to do something really historic. We also don't want someone to then be able to move into Florida and claim it immediately because that'll drive up, costs. So we're not going to allow that. So there's a lot of different things you got to contend with. But just imagine the insurance momentum continues and you're able to do property tax. Then you've basically taken, home ownership, buying a home, all the stuff, all the costs that go into that. We will have done more to take a whack at that on behalf of the people than anyone's been able to do anywhere in the country. So, and we are in a unique situation because we have so many people that visit the state and pay tax. You know, we have 141 million visitors, you know, last year. They pay hotel tax, this tax, all that. You know, I'd rather them do it, right, than you as a homeowner. So we have so many people that own second homes, vacation homes, investment properties, all these things. Why not capitalize on that and bring relief? And the thing is, you know, when the revenue's pouring in, the natural thing for elected officials to do is not to do what we've done in Florida and pay down debt or to put more in the. We've maxed out our rainy day fund. It was, I think, $1.3 billion when I came into office. Now it's like $5 billion. We've more than tripled the rainy day fund. And you're not allowed to put any more into it. We've basically topped it off. We may have to do a little more in this next fiscal year, but we're topped off on the current fiscal year. So we've made those choices. That's not necessarily true how it is forever. So you've had money come in, and a lot of times the institutional inertia leads to just spending it, and I think that's what's happened. So, you know, and Blaise has been fair to some of these local governments where he said, you know, some of these local governments haven't spent as much as we thought they would have, right, on some of these audits. And I think that that's great. But the reality is like 32 billion to 56 billion. What is that, like an 80% increase? Are you 80% better off with the services you're getting anywhere? No, of course not. Of course not. So we have an ability to do this, and I think do it very meaningfully. But that is really, I think, a key piece of the puzzle to making sure that folks are able to afford to buy a home, maintain a home in the state of Florida, and especially the younger people. You know, you look at the age of the first of these average home buyer now, I think it's like 60 years old, the average purchase. And like, you know, and that's nationwide. That, I'm sure maybe Florida may even be a little higher, right, because of our demographics. But is that, why is that? I think it's because the young people, part of it is, you know, there's some cultural changes, you know, family formation, all that, which it's hard for government to fully address that. It's a tough issue. But, you know, obviously we'd want more young families formed. I think that's good for society. But even if they do that, they want to buy a home, you know, 6% interest mortgage rate, this, that, all these other things. It doesn't work out, right? And you try to buy a home, you know, you go down the street here and buy a home, say your neighbor is 75 and has lived there for 30 or 40 years. Are you going to pay the same tax they pay? No way. You're going to pay way more tax, you know, than they're paying. So we have an opportunity to correct that, and hopefully we'll be able to get that done. Okay, do we have any questions? Yes.
Yeah, one of the beneficiaries of property taxes is the school district. Last week, the CFO mentioned that it has some say and oversight over the school district. Broward County announced last month $95 million shortfall, hiring freeze, construction boss resigned under a cloud of investigation, procurements investigated. Last week, they revealed that they got money and gave huge bonuses to administrators. There's been grand juries. You've removed school board members. Isn't it time for an outside body, the state, somebody to just take over the bureaucracy and get straight?
Well, I think you did a good job of the laundry list of failures in the Broward School District. Honestly, it's been a disaster. I mean, let's just be honest. It's been a disaster in many different ways. You know, it is really run more to benefit the entrenched interests, particularly the school unions, rather than the parents and the students. And so I think the question would be for our education commissioner, what authorities are there under current law for them to go in and do, or could they do, or would the legislature need to do things to be able to authorize? But there's a handful of spots around the state where, you know, maybe thrusting some of these entities into receivership may be the best way going forward. I think you could work things out pretty quickly, but I tell you, it's tough. It's been really tough. And when people want to reform, you end up having running into a brick wall. It's been very difficult. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Governor. I appreciate it. With respect to the insurance reduction, so people, like most of us, in the mortgage, taxes, and insurance all in one payment. And so January renewals, according to y'all, have gone down. So are we already seeing these reductions?
Well, I think so it's a good question. So I think with Citizens, it's mostly going to be in the spring, correct? So if you're a Citizens holder, you will see your renewal, and yeah, it'll likely be you'll get a notice, and then that should be reflected in your escrow payments, that you're then making from then on. For the private insurers, I think it varies of when your renewals are. But if they file for a reduction, like say they file in December, and then we announce, hey, Peninsula just filed 8.2% reduction, you're not going to see that until your next renewal. So if your next renewal is coming up, you'll get it in January. If it's not till April, then it would likely wait until April for those renewals. I think when they file between how the policies, what is there, a few months usually in between those? Yeah, so they go kind of back and forth. So yes, so keep an eye out for all that. And the one thing I would just say is, in both home and auto, you have more companies that are trying to get business now. So we say on average, right? Progressive on average 10% reduction for auto. Well, you may get a bill from Progressive. Maybe you've been a customer. Maybe they don't give you any reduction. But maybe you go and look at some of these other companies and you do. And so what I've found talking to folks throughout Florida is when they do shop, particularly on the auto side, they're seeing that. But I'd say the same thing would be applied for homeowners. Now, not every company that has entered the market is going to write homeowners in every part of the state. That's just the nature of it. And that's why, I kind of, with Citizens, we've worked to depopulate it because obviously you can't sustain 1.3 million. But, there's some of these homes in Monroe that may not get any other insurer that would be able to offer. And so I do think there's just practically speaking, on the world we live in, I think there's going to do. Now, if we were starting from scratch, you may not have wanted to do that, and I think maybe people would have made some different building decisions or be willing to really pay really significant, but there's high-risk areas that may not be able to get, so that's why I think it's like, okay, it's not going to go to zero, so why not deliver actuarially sound reductions, and that's what they've done. Yes, sir.
Governor, you signed an anti-camping law, I think, last year. So Florida wouldn't turn into California. But you go to some places like in Fort Lauderdale, and you've got basically professional bums setting up entire encampments, and the local law enforcement isn't doing anything about it. They're accosting people in their cars at intersections. Would you be willing to deploy the State Guard or National Guard to go into places where the law isn't being enforced?
Well, I think the Attorney General is looking into accountability for some of those officials, and I'm certainly willing to use the authority I have to hold anybody account who's not following the law. That law was groundbreaking at the time. Remember, this was a couple years ago, and what we said very simply is you're not going to be able to use public streets and public parks because it creates a blight on communities. Honestly, it's dangerous. It's not good for business. And so locals have a responsibility to make sure that those places are kept free of seeing that. Now, I do think in a lot of parts of Florida, that's been very positively received, and I think folks have followed the law. But I'm not surprised to hear there are certain pockets that, they almost think elections are just like advisory and like we do these things and they just think they should be able to keep going on doing what they're doing. Well, that's not the way it works, right? And so we need accountability. I'll use the levers that I have available to be able to make sure that the purpose and intent of the legislation is done. I don't think there's been things we've done. I mean, there's been few things we've done that have been more popular than that with the public because people don't want it. Remember, we cleaned up Miami Beach spring break. People were gnashing their teeth when I sent in highway patrol and all this stuff. It's just so. And then what happened? You have it orderly, and then now they don't even go really to Miami Beach like they used to because they know it's not a place the inmates can run the asylum. So we did that very well. People want order. They want clean and order. And I think you look no further than a place like San Francisco. When the Chinese dictator comes, you didn't see poop on the street then. They cleaned it. Everything was spick and span. The minute he leaves, it goes back and it looks like a third world country with that. So we don't want to see that in Florida. The legislation I signed was really strong, and we will do what we need to do to bring accountability because I think quality of life is important.
We're hearing that Lieutenant Governor Jake Collins might be announcing his run for governor. If that happens, will you endorse him?
Jay's a good guy. He served this country admirably as a Green Beret. He has a great conservative record in the Florida Senate. I don't know what he's going to announce or not announce. My role, obviously, I'm focused on the state of the state and some other things. If I get involved in the primary, you'll know it. It'll be at a time and place of my choosing, and so we'll see.
Mr. Governor, thanks again. I appreciate it. Just a couple of quick questions. You have a session starting up in Tallahassee. What are your expectations there as far as top things from that session? And with respect to, you made mention of charges against Nicolas Maduro. Where are you on that?
Well, on the Maduro, first of all, you look in South Florida, no one has a better understanding than some of our communities here about how both Chavez and Maduro destroyed the country of Venezuela. And that's Marxist rule being imposed in ways that were very predictably disastrous. And so we have yet another data point of the failure of Marxist-Leninism, and in the Western Hemisphere, all the more tragic, given that we've seen iterations of this in the past. And you look no further than Cuba and the communist dictatorship there, and you can see the failures. So there was a big, I think, sigh of relief when he was removed. I know that there's a lot of hope for what could happen in the future. I don't know that there's the pathway right now or not. I mean, we'll have to see what happens on the ground. But in the meantime, the U.S. Attorney for Southern District in New York has these charges. Obviously, the feds would take precedent, as these typically do. But we also have jurisdiction, now that he's in the country, of holding him accountable for things he's done that have impacted the laws in the state of Florida. So I know our Attorney General is reviewing that. I can tell you that if there's a basis, and I anticipate there would be a basis, he's not going to hesitate to be able to do that. And part of it's narcotics. Part of it is Maduro would release people from prison and send them to the border. We ended up with Tren de Aragua in the state of Florida because Maduro was sending. It wasn't like they just magically appeared. He was sending. And that's why, you go back a few years ago, we did the Martha's Vineyard flights for some of the people here illegally. And it's interesting because I was actually running for re-election at the time, and most of the people on that first Martha's Vineyard flight came from Venezuela. And so the media was saying, oh, Governor DeSantis, how dumb. The Venezuelan Americans aren't going to vote for you, all this stuff. And so, first of all, I didn't think that was true. Second of all, it's like, you know what? I'm going to do what I think is right, and I wanted to solve the, so whatever. But I'm going, I remember the next week I'm down in Doral, all these guys high-fiving me like, we're from Venezuela, Maduro's sending these people, it's wrong, all this other stuff. So they were the ones that were most supportive of doing it because they knew what was going on with all this stuff. So yeah, so you may see that. That's kind of in the Attorney General's sphere, but I think that would be appropriate. And look, just for me, it's like New York City and how that would work is a little bit different than how it would work in Miami. I mean, I just think I think you understand that. So, we're looking forward to the legislative session. The good thing about, my position is I say I'm kind of playing with house money because I've made a lot of promises over the years and delivered on all of them, right? I mean, I believe in delivering on what I say. If I come out and say I'm going to do something, it's not idle. I follow through and deliver. And so, we've had a great run of major successes, and so I think we want to continue the trajectory. I talked about the trajectory of budget, reducing debt, low taxes. All those things are very important. As you know, I called the special session on congressional redistricting. That'll happen sometime in April, and so it's not going to cloud the regular session. And we'll handle that at the appropriate time so you can focus on that. We are going to be I'm working with folks in both the House and Senate on crafting what ballot measure would work for the property tax. We got to be bold, obviously, but you also have to get something passed. And we're going to work very hard to do that. And so I don't know that that's going to be done in the regular session, but I know we're going to be working on it for that. And look, I mean, what better thing to have a special session just solely focused on property tax relief? Why should that have to be competing with naming a post office or a highway after someone? Let's put 100% of our effort on something that's going to be very meaningful for people. And then we've also and I'll talk a little bit more about tomorrow, we want to make sure that Floridians are not going to end up roadkill with this AI revolution that's going on. And look, private companies can develop technology as they see fit, but we do have a responsibility to make sure that the technology that's developed is ethical, that it reinforces our values as both Floridians and Americans, and certainly, we shouldn't be trying to greenlight anything that's going to displace human beings from being kind of the central actors in America's Republican experiment. And then it also goes into consumer protection, parent protection, kid protection. They have these conversations with these chat bots. And we had one mom from Texas, the chat bot told the teen that he should kill the parents. Another chatbot told the other teen he should probably commit suicide. So, this is really, really bad stuff. Also, don't want to see them building a massive data center and then sending you the bill. Data center take up 500,000, the power equivalent is a 500,000 person city that they would be able to do. And so we feel very strongly about protecting the consumer to make sure, and especially in Florida, I'd hate to see us have a big hurricane try to get the power for everyone back on. And we've done, really much better job in Florida over the years doing that than they used to. But imagine you want to have your power turned on in Fort Lauderdale and the data center comes first. I think a lot of people would not like that. So I think making sure that we're channeling that in ways that are productive, that are going to reinforce and not supplant our values and our role, I think is important. And I've talked to a lot of the legislators. I think a lot of them, feel the same way. But I'll tell you, this is only going to continue to grow more and more as this stuff becomes more pervasive. As there's other things, more and more people are going to say. So I think if we do it now, I think we're going to be in a great spot. If you wait and wait a year, well, then I think people are going to be turning to, why didn't you do something? Why is this happening like this? And I just think that there's a lot. You look back at kind of the dawn of the internet, kind of before social media. Congress did something called Section 230, which basically immunized the tech platforms from anything that was said or done on there. And I think in hindsight, that was probably a mistake. I think that could have been handled maybe a little bit more delicately. You didn't want to have frivolous litigation, but there were probably ways you could have done that maybe would have mitigated some of the problems we've seen, certainly on things like social media, which, I'm not saying there's no positives to social media, because there are, but there's a lot of negatives, and particularly for young people, it's been a big, big issue, and I know a lot of parents. And the thing about it is, as a parent, mine are in elementary school. They know how to grab a device, and they just know they figure this out. So it's very difficult, I think, for parents. And one of the best things we did in Florida was to ban the cell phones in the classroom during school. Now the students have to pay attention. It's easier to pay attention. The teachers have a chance maybe to actually teach the kids something without them all being buried on their phones. But I do think that artificial intelligence and what's being pushed is something that requires some thoughtfulness. And we have every right and duty to channel that in a way that is going to benefit our people, and not in ways that are going to be harmful. And I think there's a lot of perils out there, and you hear some of the people with this kind of transhumanist view of machines are going to do anything and it's going to render humans irrelevant. People are going to lose all the jobs. Is that the future that you want for you and your kids and your grandkids? I think most people would say probably not. All right, thanks everybody. God bless.